All right, so today we're going deep, like really deep,
Ye-
into this idea of obedience and worship.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, so we were looking at this excerpt from Pastor Ben's um, Worshipers Mana.
Right.
Have you ever read any of his stuff?
I've heard of him. I haven't read any of his stuff. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really interesting. It kind of gets into this whole spiritual dimension of what it means to be obedient, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it got us thinking, like, you know, is there something more to this? Like how we worship and how we obey, especially when we're talking about, a higher power, God, whatever that might be to you.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really interesting question. I mean, and it's something that I think people have been, grappling with for centuries, right? Like, how do those two things connect
Totally, yeah.
across different cultures and religions?
So Pastor Ben, he kind of starts off by like defining obedience as being submissive to another man's authority.
Okay.
Which, on the surface, it's like, okay, yeah, that makes sense. But then when you really think about it, it's like, it's almost like there's this assumption there that you recognize and you respect that authority in the first place.
Yeah, you have to acknowledge it even exists, right?
Exactly.
Before you can even begin to think about being submissive to it.
Totally. And, like just in everyday life, right?
Yeah.
We're surrounded by these structures of authority. Like
Everywhere.
at work, you've got your boss,
Yeah.
you've got the law, like societal rules.
Right.
Even within families, there's this
Absolutely.
kind of hierarchy.
Right.
And it's like you're much more likely to follow instructions or obey
Oh, yeah.
if you actually respect that person.
For sure.
Or you believe that the rule is actually just.
Totally.
Right. So.
Absolutely. You're not going to just blindly follow anyone, are you?
No, exactly.
It has to be earned to a certain extent.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so when it comes to like this higher power, right,
Yeah.
Pastor Ben takes this idea
Yeah.
even further.
Oh, okay.
And he says, the measure we honor, obey, and submit to God's authority is reflected by our worship to him.
Interesting. So it's not just about like the outward actions. It's about what's actually in your heart.
Yeah. It's like the real deal, right?
Yeah.
It's not just going through the motions,
Right.
like just showing up at church or saying the prayers. It's about
Yeah, like really living it, embodying it.
right. Yeah. And so I don't know, it kind of makes you wonder, right?
Yeah.
Like, are there times when people's actions might contradict their claimed devotion?
Oh, absolutely. And I think that's the real test, isn't it?
Right.
It's easy to say you believe something, but do your actions actually back that up?
Right.
And I think that, that contrast really highlights this whole idea that,
Totally.
True worship involves obedience.
Yeah, it's got to be there.
It's got to be more than just words.
Yeah. So he actually uses a really interesting example from the Bible.
Oh, okay.
He talks about the Israelites.
Right.
In Deuteronomy 28:1. And God basically makes this promise to them. He's like, look, if you guys listen to me, you follow my commandments, like I'm going to elevate you, I'm going to bless you.
Right. It's that conditional promise.
Yeah. And so it's interesting because it kind of introduces this concept of a covenant.
Yeah, like a sacred agreement.
Yeah, like a spiritual contract.
A contract, exactly.
Where obedience is like the pathway to receiving favor and these blessings.
Look at those good things, yeah.
And it's funny because, I don't know, it kind of makes me think about like covenants pop up all over the place.
They really do.
Right, like throughout history.
Yeah.
Not just in religion, but in different cultures.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a fundamental way that societies have kind of structured this relationship between, following the rules and reaching the rewards.
Yeah.
All about, that kind of exchange.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah.
So to really like drive this point home about how deep this obedience thing goes when it comes to worship, Pastor Ben brings up this story that I always find like super intense.
Oh, okay. Which one?
Abraham and Isaac.
Right, yeah.
Like when God asks Abraham to sacrifice his son.
I mean, talk about a test of faith.
Oh, man. That one always gives me chills,
Yeah, it's a powerful one.
Like, talk about ultimate trust and submission,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
And the thing is, like, even though Abraham is put through this, like, crazy test, ultimately God, like, showers him with blessings, right?
Yeah.
And it's like, his descendants, too.
Right, it's like a generational thing.
It really is. And so it's just this crazy example.
It really is.
Of like, how far obedience can go.
Yeah. It really makes you think about, what true devotion looks like.
Right.
Is it just about going to church on Sunday, or is it about, being willing to sacrifice the things that are most precious to you?
That is a heavy question.
It is. It is.
Yeah, yeah. And it kind of leads to this final point that Pastor Ben makes about obedience being a spiritual dimension.
Mm-hmm.
And he argues that it's through obedience
Mm-hmm.
that we're able to overcome our, like, baser instincts, what he calls carnal nature.
Right, right. So what do you think he means by that? Like, what is this carnal nature?
Yeah, so it's like, all those desires and impulses that we have as humans that are kind of seen as selfish
Okay.
or like counterproductive to spiritual growth.
Right, the things that are holding us back.
Right, exactly. Exactly. So it's like by choosing to obey,
Mm-hmm.
you're choosing to try to elevate yourself, to strive for something beyond just,
The immediate gratification.
right? Yeah, yeah, exactly. Like aligning yourself with this,
With a higher purpose.
yeah, higher purpose.
Yeah, even when it's tough.
Even when it's tough.
Right.
And I don't know, it makes you think, like, what are some ways that we can actually apply this in our own lives?
Yeah.
Regardless of, what you believe or your specific faith.
That's the real question, isn't it? Like, how do we take these big ideas and make them practical?
Totally, yeah.
So I think it might start with just taking a look at ourselves.
Mhm.
What are our motivations? What are those desires, those
Yeah.
carnal desires that
Yeah.
might be holding us back? And then, consciously choosing actions that are in line with our values, our aspirations,
Right.
our faith, if we have one.
Right, yeah. So, like, big picture,
Mm-hmm.
if we kind of take a step back and look at all this stuff about obedience,
Yeah.
it's clearly more than just following rules, right?
Oh, yeah.
Blindly. It's about, like you said, respect,
It's way deeper than that.
trust,
Yeah.
and like real deep submission that shows how much we actually,
Mm-hmm.
are devoted in our worship.
And I think it's a journey. It's not like you just arrive at obedience.
Right.
It's something that you're constantly working towards.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
So if Pastor Ben's right, about all this and obedience being like this key to unlocking a deeper spiritual experience, what do you think is like the most important thing for people to consider?
Oh, that's a good question. I think it's, where in your life could you be more obedient and not in a way that's like, out of fear or obligation, but out of genuine devotion,
Right.
Where could that lead to some serious personal transformation? And honestly, we've just scratched the surface here.
We have, yeah.
There's so much more to explore, but hopefully this has given you a good starting point.
Definitely, yeah. I know it has for me, so thanks for diving deep with us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me.
And for everyone listening, keep thinking, keep exploring these ideas. It's a fascinating journey.
It really is. 27 years.